Have you ever wondered what the secret is to maximizing your productivity? How is it that some people can just get so much done? Ali Abdaal answers this question in his new book called Feel Good Productivity. He says the secret to productivity isn't discipline, it's joy. Ali is a doctor turned entrepreneur and is known as a productivity expert and has amassed over 5 million subscribers on YouTube. In here, he draws upon decades of psychological research proven to drastically improve your productivity. It's divided up into 3 sections. First, he talks about the 3 energizers to make work feel good. Second, the 3 blockers to truly overcome procrastination. And finally, the 3 sustainers that prevent burnout so you can achieve lifelong productivity. There's a lot of value in this book that will genuinely change your life. But really quickly, I just want to introduce myself for those of you that are new here. My name's Satya, and currently I'm a personal trainer and college student that's studying finance and psychology. And on this channel, I share everything I learn and do as someone that's following their curiosities and trying to understand myself better and the world around me. I believe that if you want to be the best version of yourself, you have to embrace a mindset of being curious and aware. So with that being said, let's dive into part 1, the energizers. And the first out of the 3 energizers we have is play. The idea of this chapter is to understand that seriousness is overrated. Instead, learn how to approach your life and work with a sense of play. And the first step to making life feel more like play is to create an adventure. And there are 2 steps to this. And the first step is to choose your character. What this actually is to understand your personality type and which one you fit in best. And there are 8 kind of characters we can choose from. The first type is the collector, who likes to gather and organize things. The second type is the competitor, who takes pleasure in being competitive and wanting to win. The third is the explorer, who likes to wander and discover new things. The fourth is the creator, who finds joy in creating things. The fifth is the storyteller, who has an active imagination and uses it to entertain others. The sixth is the joker, who likes to make people laugh. The seventh is the director, who likes to plan, lead, and organize things and can fit into many different roles. And the last one is the athlete, who finds play in physical activities. Figure out which one you resonate with the most and try to integrate it into your life as much as possible. The second step is something that all great minds in history have done. People like Leonardo da Vinci, Steve Jobs, Albert Einstein, the list goes on. What they did was embrace their curiosities. And side note, this is why I made this part of my channel slogan, mission, whatever you want to call it. This is what my channel is basically about, just me embracing my curiosities and trying to get others to do the same thing. Learn to have a childlike curiosity. Learn to look at the world around you and just be in complete awe of everything. Just have a deep desire to just constantly learn and grow to become the best version of yourself. I don't think there's anything more energizing than just truly embracing your curiosities. Ali says the best way to do this is to have side quests, since we can't just constantly follow our curiosities every second of the day. Ask yourself, what is today's side quest gonna look like? What I typically do is figure out what podcast, YouTube video, or book I want to consume. And the second step of play is to find the fun. The first thing I want you to do is to grab a sticky note. Promise me that you will actually do this. Okay, now that you have your sticky note, I want you to find a good spot to place it around where you work. And once you found that spot, I want you to write on the sticky note, what would this look like if it were fun? The idea of this is to constantly remind yourself to make your work as fun as possible. Could you make it more funny? Could you listen to more enjoyable music? So for Ali, he listens to the Harry Potter soundtrack to make work more enjoyable. Personally, I don't do that, but I'll listen to classical music in the background, which is something I've talked about before. And for the second part of finding the fun, I want to talk about a question that I've been asked a lot. A lot of people ask me how I'm in such great shape. I don't think I'm in the most amazing shape, but I'm in pretty good shape. And I could tell them a million things like, oh, I just work hard and I go to the gym all the time and I count my calories and do all this stuff, which is not wrong. Truth be told, the reason I'm in such great shape is because I genuinely enjoy the process of going to the gym and fueling my body with the right food. That's why this part is to focus on enjoying the process and not the outcome. True joy comes from the process, not the outcome. This is why I'm in such great shape. I understand that fitness is going to be a part of me for my entire life. I'm not focused on the outcome. I'm just enjoying the process. I'm truly in the present moment. And the third and final part of play is to lower the stakes. It's impossible to embrace a feeling of playfulness if you're constantly stressed out. And feeling more relaxed is going to just improve your overall well-being and creativity. And for the first step of lowering the stakes, I want to share a famous quote from Thomas Edison. "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that don't work." And that's why the first step is to reframe failure. The only form of failure there is giving up. All failure does is signal to you that you need to try something new. You need to learn how to love failure, because failure is another opportunity for you to grow. A sure way of never succeeding in life is to be so afraid of failure that you don't even try. And for the last step of lowering the stakes, you want to be sincere and not too serious. So just picture this. You're playing a board game with a couple of your friends. One friend is taking it way too seriously. He won't let anything slide. You have to follow each and every single rule. And then there's another friend that doesn't give a shit about the game. He does whatever he wants and doesn't care about other people. Being in the middle of these two friends is what it means to be sincere. You don't want to take it too seriously, but you also don't want to give no shits about whatever it might be. And now we're on to the second energizer, which is power. What he means by power is having a sense of control over your life and actions. It can feel super draining if it feels like you have no control over this. And the first part to having more power is to boost your confidence. This step is about feeling more confident about yourself and your abilities. And confidence is not something that you were born with, and I can attest to this. I was not a confident person at all. I was a little skinny Indian kid, and now I'm like jacked, and that's so funny saying that now. Wow, I sound so fucking egotistical saying that. Anyways, but you get the idea. I was fucking skinny, I was unconfident, shy, and now I'm the complete opposite. I'd like to think I'm pretty jacked, I'm pretty charismatic, and that I come off as a confident person. And the first way of boosting your confidence is by having a so-called confidence switch, by literally becoming your own hype team. I was already unknowingly doing this before even reading about it, but you just have to tell yourself that I am that guy, that I am capable. It's literally being your own biggest fan. And yes, I know, it sounds so corny, but it works. If you've done it before, you know what I'm talking about. You literally have to fake confidence till you make it. You need to learn how to flip this confidence switch on whenever. You should be able to hype yourself up and improve your confidence at any given moment. And the second step to creating more confidence comes down to one statement. If they can, I can too. This is called the social model method. If you see someone else do something, especially if they're similar to you or came from a similar position that you're in right now, it can drastically improve your confidence, because again, if they can, then why can't you? And the second part to achieving more power is to level up your skills, which is also gonna improve your confidence. The first part of leveling up your skills is called the Shoshin approach. And the word Shoshin roughly translates to beginner's mind. You wanna make sure you're not allowing your ego to get in the way. There's a saying that you can't teach a man something if he thinks he already knows it. Just don't be ignorant and always be willing to learn and have this beginner's mind. And the next step of leveling up your skills comes from a quote from Seneca. He said, "He who teaches learns." Ali calls this the protege effect. All this really is teaching whatever you know to someone else, and this solidifies your understanding of the topic. Because if you can't teach something to someone in simple terms, it means that you don't truly understand it. And the third step to increasing your power is to take ownership of your work. The first thing you want to do is own the process of whatever it is it might be. You might not have full control over your life and work right now, but you can definitely find areas where you can take ownership. And not only do you want to own the process, but you also want to own your mindset, because your mind is the only thing that you truly have control over in this world. And it comes down to switching this one phrase from saying, "I have to do something," like It's just the worst thing in the world to saying, I get to do this. Or even better, I choose to do this. Switching have to get or choose is what's going to give you a greater sense of gratitude and control. And that's all for power. Now we're on to the final energizer, which is people. You know the people in your life that completely drain you of energy, that you hate talking to. And then there's other people in your life that just give you so much energy after the conversation. And I don't care if you're an introvert or extrovert, every single person has those people in their life that just completely lift up their soul. And the first way is to have a comrade mindset. And all this is utilizing teamwork. Now, you don't always have to be working with other people on the same project, but if you keep other people in the back of your mind of the reason why you're doing something, it can help you boost your energy. So for example, if you're trying to become someone that's super successful, obviously, you're gonna need a team to help you get there. And until you have that team so you can actually have teamwork, in the back of your mind, just remember the people that you're trying to do this for. Maybe you're trying to retire your parents or just provide for your future kids or wife, family, whatever it might be. Just reminding yourself of the people that you're trying to do this for is going to help boost your energy. And the next thing you can do is to find synchronicity, which is literally just working in the same space with other people. You don't have to be working on the same task, but just having the presence of someone next to you that's also working on something can drastically improve your energy. And the second part of using people to energize you is to find the helper's high. The first thing you want to do is to have random acts of kindness. It just feels good to be kind to others. Maybe give someone a compliment. Maybe at the cash register, donate that extra money to charity whenever it pops up. It asks you to round up for the couple cents. You know what I'm talking about. Just do those random acts of kindness because it really will just uplift your soul. And the other thing you can do is to ask help from others. People are a lot more willing to help than you would think. And asking others for their help is also going to make them feel better too. And the third and final part to using people to energize you is to over communicate the good and the bad. You want to do this because a shared joy is a double joy and a shared sorrow is a half sorrow. So when you share good news with someone, it's going to uplift them and it's also going to uplift you a little more. And when you share negative news with someone, it's going to help get rid of those negative emotions because they're gonna be there for emotional support. There's 3 ways to beat procrastination. The first method is using motivation by asking yourself, how do I get myself to actually want to do this? The second way is being disciplined. How do I push through it and still do the work even though I don't feel like it? And the third way is the unblock method, which is better than using motivation or being disciplined. It's asking the question, what's blocking me from doing it? This part of the book is what's really going to solve the root cause of procrastination because motivation and discipline sometimes just aren't enough. And now we're on to part 2, the blockers. And the first unblocker is gaining clarity. Ali talks about the fog of uncertainty, which is basically just being paralyzed by not knowing what lies ahead. We become overwhelmed by the complexities and unknowns of the situation, and this is what causes us to become paralyzed. And we get paralyzed in 4 different ways. And the first way is overestimation. We overestimate the negative consequences. The second is hypervigilance. We become overly attentive of signs of failure. The third is unrecognition. You completely ignore the factors that would contribute to success and anything positive in general. And the fourth is avoidance. You just completely put off making a decision. These 4 things is what causes fear and anxiety, causing us to procrastinate. And we can solve this by asking a couple of questions, which is what we're going to get into now. The first thing we want to do is ask why. And the first way of asking why is to use commander's intent. And all this is doing is understanding the why over the how. You deeply want to understand your big why and the reasoning behind actually taking the action. You really want to ask yourself, what is the purpose behind this? Why am I doing this? Why is this important to me? Once you have a big why, it becomes a lot easier to overcome these negative emotions. And actually take time out of your day to think about why. Sit down, get a piece of paper, get a pen and a piece of paper, sit down, think, and really ask yourself, why? And once you've used Commander's intent to figure out this why, we can move on to the second step, which is to ask why 5 times. The reason you're asking yourself this 5 times is because each time you ask yourself why, you get deeper to the core purpose of whatever the task might be. And most likely, you're going to end up at the answer from the last exercise. Now that we've got the big picture why, it's time we create a concrete plan by asking what. And the first thing we want to do is set a nice goal. I'm sure you've heard of SMART goal setting before, but nice goal setting is going to be especially great for procrastinators. The N stands for near term. This is to create short milestones along the way to just decrease overwhelm. This can be daily, weekly, or even monthly. The I stands for input based. So for example, instead of focusing on losing 40 pounds, focus on going to the gym 4 times a week. The C stands for controllable. Focus something that's in your control so it gives you more power. So it might be something like read for 30 minutes a day. And the E stands for energizing, and you're just gonna want to integrate the energizers that we mentioned earlier. And the second part of asking what is to use the crystal ball method. Imagine it's 1 week from now and you haven't started the task that you told yourself you were going to do. What are the top 3 reasons you didn't start it? What can you do to mitigate the top 3 reasons that stopped you from starting? Who can you ask for help for sticking to this commitment? And what action can you take right now that will increase the likelihood of you doing the task? If you answer these 4 questions, it's going to drastically decrease the likelihood of things going wrong. And the last thing we need to do to gain more clarity is to ask when. Because if you don't know when you're doing something, chances are you won't actually do it. The goal is to not have to think about when you have to do it. You can just look at what you said and you can just do it. The first thing we can do is called implementation intentions. This is, if X happens, then I will do Y. An example of this would be, when I wake up in the morning, I will meditate for 10 minutes. When I walk into the kitchen, I'll eat some fruit. I'm sure you get the idea. And the next thing we can do is something I'm sure you've heard of everywhere on the internet, and that is to time block. And there are 3 levels to this. Level 1 is to just make time blocks for tasks that are important to you that you've been avoiding. Level 2 is to time block your entire day, literally mapping out everything that you'll do. And level 3 is to time block your entire week. Now, it doesn't have to go according to plan, but it's called your ideal week, because ideally you would be sticking to your schedule. It's time to move on to the second unblocker, and that is to find courage. And the first way to actually overcome our fear is to know our fear. You can't truly overcome your fears if you're not aware enough about yourself to understand what they are. And the first step to knowing our fear is to use the emotion label. The goal here is to become aware of when we're actually feeling fear. And then once you're aware of this feeling of fear, you want to dig deeper and expand your awareness on it to understand where it's coming from. Not only is increasing your self-awareness going to allow you to better deal with this fear, but it's also going to release the fear more. And you can do this by asking yourself a couple of questions. What am I afraid of? Where does this fear come from? Am I feeling this because I don't think I'm good enough? Or is it because I'm afraid of the opinions of other people? Really just try to step outside of that emotion and understand where it's coming from. And the second thing we can do is to use the identity label. You want to become aware of the identity that you're labeling yourself with. Stop labeling yourself as a procrastinator. It's only going to make it worse because you're literally just affirming that identity on yourself. Be aware enough to know that you need to be careful with the words that you speak over yourself. Instead of affirming to yourself you're a procrastinator, tell yourself that you're curious and that you're a lifelong learner. And this kind of person doesn't get stuck in a procrastination rut. Now that we've understood our fear, we can move on to the next step, which is to reduce our fear. And the first thing we can do is use the 10-10-10 rule. All you need to do is ask yourself, will this matter in 10 minutes? Will it matter in 10 weeks? And finally, will it matter in 10 years? Most likely, 10 years from now, it won't matter at all. Even maybe 10 weeks from now, it won't matter. And reminding yourself that it's not that big of a deal is going to drastically reduce your fear. But sometimes the fear we face is from our confidence and self-doubt, which is something that I'm a victim to all the time, especially with this YouTube channel, because I'm just starting out. So this is something that I'm working on a lot. To solve this, we want to use the confidence equation. Self-confidence equals perception of ability minus perception of standards. If we believe our ability is lower than the standard, then we'll be paralyzed and we won't feel confident, and vice versa. So we talked about how to increase our confidence earlier, but now what we want to do is reduce how good we need to be in order to get started. Ask yourself, how confident do I need to be to actually start this? Could I just get started even though I still feel uncomfortable? Most of the time you're gonna say yes, and what you actually need to do is focus on getting started even though it might not be perfect. You need to learn how to lower your standards and allow yourself to make mistakes. So we've talked about knowing and reducing our fear. Now it's on to the last step, which is to overcome it. And the first thing you can do comes from a famous psychological effect called the spotlight effect. This is when you think that everyone around you is paying a lot of attention to you in every single detail that you're doing. This is another thing that I struggle with a lot, but I just have to remind myself that nobody actually gives a fuck. The truth is that everyone is concerned about how they're coming across. Everyone is spotlighting themselves, so it's impossible for them to put the spotlight on you if they have it on themselves. And with everything that I'm saying, it's not a magic bullet. It takes time for you to overcome your fear. And this is kind of me talking to myself, because I struggle with spotlight effect and all this other stuff a lot too, but over time I've definitely got better at dealing with it. And the next thing we can do is actually something Adele does, and she took it as inspiration from Beyonce. Beyonce has this alter ego called Sasha Fierce. She would step into this alter ego before she stepped on stage to give her a lot more confidence to perform well. And this idea is called the Batman effect. You want to create an alter ego and really try to feel, visualize, and step into this person that's just confident and brave. Just try to embody their traits of being fearless as much as possible. And while you're stepping into this alter ego, you can say this mantra over yourself. It's cheesy, I know. Like this affirmation stuff, I like this stuff even though it's cheesy. Most of the time the cheesy and corny things are actually like the things you should be paying attention to. Anyway, you can just say to yourself, I am confident, I am fearless, I am unstoppable, and just really trying to feel what it would feel like to be confident, fearless, and unstoppable. Again, I know this is cheesy as fuck, but you need to have an open mind and be willing to try these things out. And now we're on to the final unblocker, and that is to understand how we can actually get started. And to get better at getting started, we want to understand Newton's first law of motion, which is the law of inertia. This states that an object at rest stays at rest, while an object in motion stays in motion unless acted on by an external force. So how does this translate over to productivity? If you're doing nothing, it's so easy to just keep on doing nothing. And the same thing applies to when you start working. If you're working, it's a lot easier to just keep on working rather than stopping. Getting started is like overcoming a hill on a bike. It's going to be uncomfortable and take a lot of energy to get over the hill. But once you're over the hill, it's just smooth sailing from there. And the first way to make it easier to get started is to reduce friction. First, we want to reduce the environmental friction. We want to tweak our environment to make the task as easy and as obvious as possible to do, and the things that we don't want to do as hard and as invisible as possible. So if you want to overcome procrastination, the best thing to do is to keep all your work stuff on your table and have everything open for what you need to do. And of course, it's not just environmental friction that's going to get in the way. It's also going to be your mood. That's why we need to reduce our emotional friction. And we can do this by using one of the most ancient productivity hacks of all time, and that's called the 5-minute rule. The point of this is to commit yourself to doing just 5 minutes of full focused work. And once the time is up, you can decide if you want to stop or keep going. But in order for this rule to actually work, you need to be genuine about it. If you actually want to stop after the 5 minutes, then feel free to go ahead. But 80% of the time, you're just gonna wanna keep going because of the law of inertia. And the next part to getting started is to actually take action. And the first thing we want to do is to actually define the next action step. You want to find that one domino that's gonna make the rest fall. And you don't wanna think of the overarching idea like going to the gym. You want to literally think of the next step. The next step of going to the gym is to just put on your workout clothes. It sounds so simple, but that's why it works so well, because it takes your eye off the entire thing and just on the small step that's right in front of you. And the next thing that you want to do is to track your progress. This dramatically increases your chances of achieving your goal for a couple reasons. First, it helps you become more aware of any areas that you might be falling behind in. Second, it can help you celebrate wins along the way so that you're enjoying the process and not just focused on the outcome. But most importantly, it actually shows you that you're making progress towards your goal. And seeing yourself make progress is the best feeling in the world. So far, what we've talked about is really just overcoming that small hump, but this last part of getting started is going to tackle the procrastination that's going to set later on. And the solution to this is to learn how to support yourself. The first way is by finding an accountability buddy. Not only are they going to energize you like we talked about earlier, but they're also gonna make sure you're staying along the path to your goals and really help you overcome procrastination anytime that you feel it. And the final thing that you can do is to learn how to forgive yourself. Beating yourself up over not doing your work can be a worse thing than procrastination, because you're gonna be focused on the negativity, and then you're gonna feel that negativity, and then that negativity is just gonna amplify, causing you to go into this fucking spiral and just never actually get your work started because you're just constantly beating yourself up. Learn how to accept it, forgive yourself, and then focus on something positive. Try and focus on a small win that you had. You really need to train your mind to focus on the positive instead of the negative, so that it's easier to pick yourself back up, because you're gonna fall down a lot. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. You can't allow your mind to be fixated on the failure and procrastination. And now we're on to the last part of the book, the sustainers. Now, using the energizers and unblocking so that we can overcome procrastination won't matter if we don't learn how to overcome burnout. There are 3 kinds of burnouts. The first one is called an overexertion burnout, which happens when you just take on too much work. The second one is called a depletion burnout, which happens when you aren't properly recharging your mind, body, and soul. And the third one is called a misalignment burnout, which happens when you're doing work that no longer fulfills you or brings joy. Dealing with these 3 kind of burnouts is the final part to feel good productivity. And the first sustainer we're going to be talking about is conserve. And this is going to tackle the overexertion burnout. Steve Jobs has a famous quote: "People think focus means saying yes to the thing you've got to focus on, but that's not what it means at all. It means saying no to the 100 other good ideas that there are." That's why the first thing we need to do in order to conserve is to do less. You must do less so you can do more. And the first thing we need to do in order to do less is to figure out where our energy is actually going. And this is called the energy investment portfolio. What you want to do is get a piece of paper and split it in half. On the left side is list A, and on the right side is list B. List A is going to be all your hopes, dreams, and ambitions. Things that you would like to do in the future, but you don't need to necessarily do right now. And list B is going to be filled with your active investments. Becoming more aware of where your energy is going to help you understand more what you should be saying yes to and what you should be saying no to. And the next step to doing less is a skill that I struggle with a lot and have been for years, and that is understanding the power of saying no. But there are 3 things we can do to get better at this skill. The The first one is called hell yes or no. When you're presented with something to do, you have only two options. It's either a hell yes or it's a no. It can't be anything in between. If the thing you're debating on doing isn't a hell yes, then it's just not worth doing. The second trick is to think like an economist, and that's to take opportunity cost into equation. You need to be aware enough to understand that when you're saying yes to something, you're also saying no to something else. So remind yourself what you're saying no or yes to, and if it's actually worth it, and if there's something better you can do instead. And the last trick is to avoid the 6-week trap. This is when you say yes to something that's a couple of weeks away. This is kind of similar to the first trick where it's either a hell yes or a no. If you're not excited about it happening tomorrow, then there's no reason you should be saying yes to it if it's 6 weeks from now. And the next step for conserving our energy is to resist distraction. And the first thing we can do to get better at resisting distraction is to add friction between whatever it is that's distracting you. And obviously for 99% of people, that's gonna be your phone. So you can add friction to it by turning it off and putting it in a completely different room. But there are just times where you just end up on your phone doom scrolling. But you need to be aware enough to catch yourself doing this. And then ask yourself, is this what I actually want to be doing right now? Sometimes the answer is yes, but 90% of the time it's gonna be a no. The feeling of being distracted is inevitable. You're gonna wanna stray off the course of your task and do something else. That's why the next thing we should be doing is to make sure we're correcting our course as soon as possible. The idea of this is to be aware enough to catch yourself becoming distracted and straying off the course, and being able to bring yourself back to the task at hand instead of convincing yourself to just scroll for 2 more minutes. Just because you became distracted doesn't mean you should stay distracted. And the third thing we can do to get better at conserving our energy is to break more. Studies show that the most productive people take a break ratio of 52 minutes of work for 17 minutes of a break. Remember, you're a human being, not a machine. Sometimes you need to take 1 step back so you can take 3 steps forward. Breaks aren't considered a treat. They're literally a necessity. While Ali was a doctor, he was forced to take a break every 4 hours because he would end up doing more harm than good. And the first thing we can do is to schedule breaks into our calendar and schedule more of it than you would think. But you don't need to always schedule your breaks. Unplanned rest can also be beneficial, and these are called energizing distractions. Specifically, Ali talks about him opening his door while he would do work and allowing his friends to just stop by whenever, instead of having this deep, cultivated focus, because he would end up gaining more energy from talking to his friends that would enable him to do more work. And the second sustainer is to recharge. This is going to combat the depletion burnout. We're really trying to break away from things that we think recharge us, like scrolling on our phone or eating an unhealthy meal, and embracing things that actually recharge us, like going for a walk or working out. And the first way we can recharge is to recharge creatively through calm activities. Calm stands for competence, autonomy, liberty, and mellow. And there are 2 kinds of calm activities: hobbies and projects. The hobbies are something that's just low stake. There's not an end goal to it. You're just doing it because you genuinely enjoy the process. So it might be something like painting or playing an instrument. The idea of this is to have an area of your life where you're not worried about getting better and the stakes aren't high. You're just enjoying the process. And the difference between a project versus a hobby is that the project has a definitive beginning and end to it. And the next way we can recharge is to recharge naturally. The first way is to spend more time in nature. But if it's hard to get out in nature because you might live in a city, bring nature into your home. Have plants, have paintings of it, or consider even just playing a thunderstorm sound when you're falling asleep.
So, as I was editing this long-ass video, which I hope you're getting a lot of value from, I realized I forgot to talk about the second way of recharging naturally. That's what it is. And that is to just take walks, taking walks in nature. That's that's really it. Anyways, let's get back into it.
What we've been talking about so far is to recharge mindfully, which is great, but it still takes a little bit of energy. So we want to make sure we're still able to recharge mindlessly. And the first way you can recharge mindlessly is to just let your mind wander. While you're taking a shower, don't play any music, just let your thoughts happen. While you're going for a walk in nature, just let your thoughts happen. Don't listen to anything. Our minds are like a mailbox. If we don't ever check our mailbox, mail is just gonna pile up. And letting your mind wander is the time to take the mail out of the box. And then we're able to just sort everything out and truly just clear out the clutter. And the last part of recharging is called the write-off principle. The idea of this is to just write off a day, to do absolutely nothing. Just give yourself permission to just relax. This is different from watching TV when you shouldn't be, because in the back of your mind, you're gonna be thinking, oh, I really shouldn't be watching TV right now, but I'm going to anyway. But applying this principle is gonna get rid of that guilty thought in the back of your mind so you can truly recharge. And the last part of the sustainers is alignment. This is going to tackle the misalignment burnout. But before we get into that, we need to talk about the 4 different kinds of motivations that exist so you truly understand how to apply this principle. I'm sure you've heard of extrinsic and intrinsic motivation before, but if you haven't, extrinsic motivation is being motivated from an external source. Maybe a statement like, I'm doing this because people that are important will like and admire me more. Intrinsic motivation is the opposite, where you're motivated by yourself and something inside you. So a statement like, I'm doing this because I love the process. But you probably haven't heard of these 2 other motivators before. But to better understand these 4 motivators, we can put it on a spectrum called the relative autonomy continuum. On the left end of the spectrum, we have extrinsic motivation, which is the least autonomous. And on the right, we have intrinsic motivation, which is the most autonomous. Going from left to right, we end up at introjected motivation. This is still primarily extrinsic motivation, but increases the level of autonomy just a little bit. So a statement like, I'm doing this because I'll feel guilty if I don't. And lastly, we have identified motivation. This is still extrinsic motivation, but it's the most autonomous form of it. So a statement like, I'm doing this because I truly value the goal that I'm working towards. Even though you're doing something for an external reward, you still truly value the reward, which involves some intrinsic motivation. And this is a kind of motivation that we want to be using to avoid misalignment burnout. This is because it's completely aligned with you internally, but you have this outside factor that's able to help you push past your limits. And for me, this is my YouTube channel. And the first thing we need to do to draw upon this identified motivation is to figure out the long-term horizon. And the first thing we want to do is take advantage of the uology method, aka just reflecting on death. What better way to start than to reflect on the end of the long-term horizon? When we think about death, we're going to be focused on our intrinsic goals rather than our extrinsic goals. It's exactly why when people face a near-death experience, they can completely change all of their values. But not only do you want to just think about death so you understand your intrinsic values, you also want to think about what people would say about you at your funeral. I'm sure you'd rather have people talk about how great of a person you were rather than your accomplishments in life, like how much money you made. Truly meditate on it and constantly ask yourself, what do I value? Really expand your awareness and just go deep within to find the answer. Okay, so now we have the big picture and you understand what truly matters to you. Now we just need to figure out what path is the right one. And we can do this by using the Odyssey plan. At the core of this, you want to ask yourself, what do I want my life to look like in 5 years from now? But you want to go a little bit further than this. The first thing you want to do is ask yourself, what will my life look like 5 years from now if I continue down the path that I'm going? Second, you want to find out your alternative path. Ask yourself, what would my life look like 5 years from now if I took a completely different path? And lastly, you want to find your radical path. path. What would my life look like 5 years from now if money, social obligations, and the opinions of other people didn't matter? Now that we've got the long-term horizon, we can move on to the medium term. And the first thing we want to do is use the wheel of life. This is going to help you find out how you can truly become successful, because success is more than just money and accolades. There's 3 parts for health, 3 parts for work, 3 parts for relationships. Health has body, mind, and soul. Work has mission, money, and growth. And relationships have family, romance, and friends. Then you want to ask yourself what you want to focus on the most and what aligns with your personal values. Now, the wheel of life gives you the abstract values, but it doesn't give you the specific steps. And that's where the 12-month celebration comes in. Imagine it's 12 months from now and you're having dinner with your best friend. You're celebrating about all the areas that you've improved in your life. Now look back at the wheel of life and write down what you would want to tell your friend about each of these categories, and make sure you're getting specific. And then ask yourself, what do I need to do over the next year to make this 12-month celebration a reality? Now we figured out the long and medium term horizon. Now it's on to the short term. The first thing we want to do is called the 3 alignment quests. Each morning, choose 3 actions for your day that will help you move one step closer in each of the categories of the wheel of life. So 1 for health, 1 for work, and 1 for relationships. And the final thing to bring this into a full circle is called the alignment experiments. First, identify an area of your life where it feels unfulfilling. Second, come up with a hypothesis with what you could change in order to make it feel more fulfilling. And the last step to it is to actually execute on it. Figure out how that change in action makes you feel. Are you more fulfilled, less fulfilled, or neither? Remember, these are experiments. Keep playing around with it and figure out what works and what doesn't. And now we're at the end of the book. The last word is to think like a productivity scientist. The idea of this is to understand that you need to play around with it. Some things will work better for other people. It will work faster for other people. Again, you want to think like a productivity scientist and really experiment with the different things. Now, everything in this book isn't going to immediately change your productivity, but it will certainly change your productivity for your entire life. But if you want to figure out how you can instantly improve your productivity like I did, just click on this video right over here. And remember to always stay curious and aware.